Welcome into the Your Illini Nation pregame show. Tristan Thomas here with Joey Wagner, and back at Memorial Stadium for the final time this season. Illinois hosting Michigan State. Both teams coming off a bye week. Both teams coming off a pair of losses as well. So, Joey, what's the biggest things you're looking for this game, and Illinois trying to get a key 7th win?
You get back on track. I mean, you take it, but you can explain away the loss at Oregon, the loss at Penn State, losing last week. I mean, that was a tough loss against a Minnesota team that it's not a bad Minnesota team, Tristan, by any stretch of the imagination, but that's definitely a winnable game at home. And just the way that went with the turnovers and the offense never really getting on track, that lingered, it felt like, for a while. And losses like that, in the margin losses to teams that you're roughly on the same plane with, those tend to stick around. So especially offensively, get back on track, get Luke Altmaier comfortable and looking like he's commanding this offense again. He said it feels weird. I mean, the stats aren't great, but I feel like we've had a lot of conversations over the last few weeks about Luke Altmaier because the first 6 games, he raised the bar so much for what an Illinois quarterback could be, and he played as well as he did. So when it's not that, you look and you say, okay, what's going on here? So just get him comfortable, get him back in the flow of things, whether that's an RPO, whether that's quick hitters to Pat Bryant, to Zachary Franklin, let him run a little bit if he needs to. I think you get that going, and that'll give you a little bit of breathing room in these final 3 games.
I think it's been a kind of odd last month or so where Illinois hasn't really had, of course, the 2 losses in a row, the bye week mixed in there, but they haven't had a really convincing win, I feel like, since like Nebraska. I mean, Purdue was obviously like you're just –
that should have been.
Yeah, it was in the first half, and then you're just feeling lucky to get out of there with the win in overtime. But I guess how important is a win in terms of avoiding a 2022 type slide?
Yeah, that's really what it is, right? Is you look back at November's with Brett Bielema, and I know last season they had the Indiana win, but that took magic to get to that point, Tristan, right? So November's have kind of been, Brett Bielema says, November's are a big month to be remembered. It's kind of a paraphrasing of what he said, but it's just not gone that way. So when you see the Minnesota game go the way that it did, then start people in the back of their mind thinking, oh boy, is this the same back into November that we've seen 1,000 times here before? So just to reverse that, right, and make it clear against the Michigan State team. We'll get into this injuries here momentarily, Tristan, but just make it clear that, hey, this isn't a free fall slide in November where you're going to end up in the Pinstripe Bowl because you've lost out the final 4 games. You got a chance to really go to the Citrus Bowl. That next non-college football playoff Big Ten team feels like a path right there. They've been here a number of times this season. Get there, right? Keep pushing forward and show that you're not a team that – and look, depth has a lot to do with some of those November swoons where you look at corners been hit. Illinois relatively healthy coming into this game outside of the injuries we already knew. So just kind of flip it, right, and get rid of that taste that you feel like can start to linger if they lose this.
Yeah, and that's also, the vibes may be at kind of a low point for the season. But at the same time, you got 3 games left here. Illinois could win 9 games if you take care of business and kind of turn the tide. You mentioned injuries. Certainly some guys getting healthy from the bye week, and I guess good timing for another bye week in that sense. But, I mean, who are some of the key guys out on both sides?
Yeah, Malik Elzy is out today for Illinois. We don't know what the nature of his injury is. Joe Barna remains out for Illinois. Miles Scott, we'll get into that. He's out for the first half via the targeting penalty. So those, not anyone in the starting group, but Malik Elzy we've seen come in and play meaningful snaps for Illinois. The big one for Michigan State, Tristan, is Charles Brantley, the defensive back. He's one of their better corners on this team, and kind of one of those situations coming in. It's like, okay, if he takes Pat Bryant, if he takes Zachary Franklin, you immediately look to the other one. So Michigan State is going to be a little bit limited in the secondary this season, or this game rather. I'm sorry, the football getting thrown around up here. So that's a big storyline. It kind of eerily reminds you of 2022 where they came in and they were all suspended and it was a whole deal and they were really thin and they won. And again, flip that narrative here. But to get Luke Altmaier going, we said it was a big deal. Without Brantley, that really should open the door for Illinois to pass the ball pretty effectively.
Well, and you talk about the some winning kind of conditions in that game, and maybe seeing a little bit of that today as well. Kind of some eerie
first fall weather game.
I know,
right?
I'm bundled up here. It's like officially getting cold here. You mentioned Brantley out with also Illinois trying to get some more explosive plays, get that passing game back to where it's been throughout the season. What overall is, like, I guess, a big key to getting that reignited?
Yeah, I mean, Luke Altmaier just hasn't looked crisp, hasn't looked comfortable. Obviously, it's him, but at Illinois' best earlier this season, we saw that passing game where they stretched the field, where it's Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin. You would have some of those 20-plus, those 15-plus yard passes to really open things up a little bit. So get back to that and let Pat Bryant in his final game at Memorial Stadium, let him try to get some of those big plays over the top so you don't have to go on those 8-play drives and you can move it down a little bit more. And obviously, look, they've got to protect Luke Altmaier. They've not done a very good job of that in recent games. The good news for Illinois, Michigan State doesn't get after the quarterback very well. So this is a game, really, you could see the offensive line start to puff its chest out, get a little bit of that swagger back, keep the quarterback upright. Luke Altmaier, don't have to worry as much about having pressure bearing down on you. You would think there will not be another 3-man rush that gets to him like the final play against Minnesota. So just let him feel comfortable back there. Let the offensive line get a little bit going with them. And obviously you would think that should cut back on maybe some of the fumbles we've seen them have here in recent weeks too.
You talk about the quarterback on the other side, Aiden Childs, a guy who has turned the ball over at times. I guess for people who don't know who Aiden Childs is, we were talking about The Office beforehand. Why don't you explain him to me like I'm 5?
He's really athletic. He's got a big arm, but he's still raw, and he will turn the ball over, which if you're Illinois, you kind of like that idea, right? Like he can make all the throws. There's going to be a throw or two today that Aiden Childs makes. You're like, wow, that's a big time throw because he's got all of that. He followed Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, but he puts it in harm's way. In this Illinois defense, you keep saying, who are they without the turnovers? They might not have to find out today. This is a chance to get after that, to get back in that takeaway category, again, without Miles Scott for the first half of this game from the targeting. So Mac Resetich, he'll have the in-helmet communication. Can he make a play in center field back there, a game-changing play? That's what this Illinois defense hasn't had, whether it be a turnover, whether it be even a sack where you just feel like they've completely thrown an opposing drive off course. Can they get back to that a little bit? And Childs is going to give you an opportunity or two to come up with an interception. There's two things that kind of a good and a bad, right? Michigan State's offensive line struggles. They give up a lot of pressures on the edges. Hello, Gabe Akis. Hello, Seth Coleman. Their chance to really go in there and make a game-changing play. But on the flip side, if you flush Childs out of the pocket, he can go and he can move. And we've seen mobile quarterbacks be a problem for Illinois, whether that's an option play, which you need those two outside linebackers to really read that well, or whether that's just him getting out and using his legs and kind of freelancing. It looked like you saw in the second half against Purdue. So opportunities to get back there, to put pressure on him. I think he's got 5 interceptions while he's been under pressure this season. So those opportunities exist. But if he starts running and gets comfortable with his legs, then what's going to happen? That's a big angle for this defense.
I think you're definitely going to lean on some of those playmakers on the defensive line, especially with the linebackers and the thinning of that position with Dylan Rosiek out. Yeah. Who are you looking to maybe step up inside linebackers?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of James Krutz, a lot of Ryan Mead. James Krutz, look, he plays at 150 miles an hour all the time. He's an incredibly intense guy. You would expect that, having heard about his brother, and you saw his dad play
his dad was pretty
in Chicago,
intense.
Very intense. I think he probably remains that way. But James Krutz has got to find a way to – there's times he's overrun his gap or he's just been going too fast. And Archie McDaniel said you'd rather have – he calls them whoa guys than go guys, which means you got to bring him back a little bit. But there's a balance, right? Because you don't want to take that aggressiveness, that physicality that makes him him. You don't want to take that away from him completely. So you got to let him – maybe that's just with more reps and you get comfortable. But you've seen what happens when he over pursues and all of a sudden you've got a gap that's unaccounted for and the running back gets through that. So I would expect him, Ryan Mead. We've seen a decent bit of Ryan Mead. He's a former walk-on. He's a really good story. He's serviceable, but not necessarily a playmaker. The guy I'm really wondering, Tristan, Kanina Odeluga. We saw him a lot as a freshman in 2022. He may have been a redshirt freshman that year in 2022. He's really good at getting after the quarterback, and we heard Aaron Henry talk about it. He didn't say Kanina Odeluga's name, but listening to him on Monday, you kept thinking, you talking about Kanina Odeluga up there? Because he talks about being different on third downs and early downs, and there's a gamble that comes with that, right? If they convert, then all of a sudden you got a third down package out there on early downs. There's a lot of chess moves involved in that, right? But if you want to look different, if you want to get after the passer, Kanina Odeluga is a good option at linebacker. He's done it, and I think that's the big thing. He's coming off an ankle injury he had almost exactly a year ago at this time at Iowa. And that took him a while to get back to form. He had been cleared since training camp, but Brett Bielema had said earlier in the season that he's just physically not back to where he was. I think that has a lot to do with playing in space. But if you can just turn him loose after the quarterback, I'm curious to see if Illinois goes down that route, because he can certainly make a play or two.
A guy who's had an impact at linebacker that's mainly been a special teamer, Ryan Mead,
right.
A story we were able to dive into a little bit this week. What's it been like seeing him kind of, his progression throughout the years of coming in as a walk-on and then, now playing a solid role for the defense?
Yeah, he stuck around. He was a walk-on from Brooklyn, not exactly a haven for walk-ons here at Illinois. He stuck around through the coaching change, and primarily a core four is what Brett Bielema calls kickoff, kick return, punt return, special teams guy. But Archie McDaniel, really, those two connected. He impressed Archie McDaniel when McDaniel was hired in the spring, and he's found his way into that linebacker role. He's not been perfect, right? There's been games he struggled. I thought he had his better game against Minnesota before the open week. But to see him kind of stick through, it's a funny story. He told me, a year ago when we kind of talked about, hey, you're in this role now. The first day to report to Illinois football as a freshman, this guy shows up in a three-piece suit. Didn't really know what to expect. Everyone else is in sweatpants or shorts or whatever the case may be. And he stuck through it. And, I asked him, I said, how hard is it to play football, to play linebacker in the Big Ten? He said, I'm glad you asked. It's really, really difficult. And that probably goes without saying, but there's always that other side of it, right? And it's fair to be critical of players when they have moments of struggling, but you also have to zoom out and say, look, this is a tall order for a guy who is a walk-on, a 6-year walk-on who's really been through a lot here. So it's cool to see him have these moments, and Illinois is going to lean on him and James Kreutz here in these final 3 games.
Yeah, man, dress for success, I guess. I
know we should all take notes.
Right. What do you make of the senior class overall, the guys who will be honored today? Some, obviously some transfers, kind of one-year guys, but some guys who have been, really key members of the Brett Bielema era.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things we should mention before we talk about the seniors. Kevin Wigginton and Alec Bryant are going through the senior day ceremony. That doesn't mean they won't be back next season, but anytime you see that, you kind of put your antennas up and wonder what's going on. Hugh Robertson is in that conversation as well. He's 31. Maybe we'll see what his future holds for him. But you talk about the senior class, and it's a little bit, not a very big senior class, Tristan. So it's a smaller group. But there's stories tucked away, right? We've talked about Ryan Mead. Ezekiel Holmes had injury after injury after injury. A position changed twice. He was a defensive end for Lovie Smith, outside linebacker. Now he's playing more on the defensive line, but closer to the football. So you look at him, and then Pat Bryant. You've got to talk about Pat Bryant, a guy who signed before Brett Bielema was hired, didn't know the guy for anything, stuck through a position coaching change when George McDonald's left for Justin Stepp. Went from a blocker to kind of a rotation guy to a solid Big Ten starter, and now you're looking at him as a guy who's going to be in that all Big Ten, maybe not first team like we had thought earlier in this season, Tristan, but an all Big Ten, maybe an honorable mention, a third-team guy. It's really cool to see his rise. I know you talked to him earlier this week, and he's engaged to be married now, and he's kind of had that full college experience when you're a fan and you see these guys and they sign on National Signing Day. You don't really know what to expect, and it's been a slow build-up for him. And then, as you mentioned, a group of transfers here or there. J.C. Davis, invaluable at left tackle, especially they've got younger guys, but he was a big bridge guy, right? So you're not leaning so much on maybe a Brandon Henderson, who would have, I think, been starting left tackle had they not gone in the portal. You go and get him, and it's not been perfect for him either, but he's been a pretty serviceable left tackle to a good left tackle, especially in pass protection. Dennis Briggs, huge contributor on the defensive line for this Illinois team. T-Rod Edwards, another guy who transferred in 3 years ago, feels like forever, and he's put himself into his start. So there's stories tucked away, but it's also new college football, right, where it's a lot of transfers in this mix, and you don't really care if those transfers are helping you win games. Illinois got 6 wins, and they're a pretty good chance at a 7th today.
Well, you talk about the progression of a guy like Pat Bryant, where he comes in and goes to media days, and you're kind of like, okay, well, I guess Pat Bryant is a leader of this team.
Yeah.
Obviously, coming in last year, the previous year, Johnny Newton, Isaiah Williams, of course, those guys were going to be the leaders. But see a guy like Pat Bryant, and I guess what have you made of, the culture talk of what a guy like that does, and being player led, and going in early and stuff that we've heard from Brett Bielema. I mean, how important is that stuff actually in your mind?
It's big. It's really important, and it's even if it's not full team wide, maybe it's a little more in the offense, and definitely a lot more in your position room. To see a guy, if you're a Colin Dixon, if you're a Tyshawn Griffin, I'm trying to go down the list here and name off some younger receivers. Hank Beatty, who's probably been around for too long to include him in that mix. You see a guy coming in at 5:30 in the morning. You know who Pat Bryant saw doing that? Isaiah Williams
Yeah,
a year
yeah.
ago. Casey Washington a year ago. It's cliche. It's every bit of cliche, right? The whole tradition never graduates. Every coach will say they got T-shirts all over every town in the state of Illinois, and I understand it. But it really matters when you can see, like, okay, those guys did it last year. Now you hear the same thing about Pat Bryant this year. Are you going to hear the same thing about a Colin Dixon next year, about a Hank Beatty next year? Maybe the production isn't what Pat Bryant and Scary Franklin are doing, but the kind of the way that they approach this thing is very similar. And I think that's what they're talking about. You can go through every position room on the roster and say pretty much similar things about a number of guys.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about talent and the hard work and dedication, pairing those things together, I think that's when you're really cooking. Another room that's shown some talent this year is the running backs. Josh McCray, I guess an underrated kind of storyline where he didn't get a lot of work, but made some big plays in the Minnesota game. I mean, how important is it to get him rolling and get him going downhill?
You know, I thought after that run, that's probably one of the better runs we've seen, that touchdown run against Minnesota from Josh McCray in a couple of years. And you thought, hey, keep going with this guy. And he had 7 touches at the end of the day against Minnesota. That's not enough, Tristan. It's just the way he was running. And, you know, you didn't see it like this early in the season, and Caden Fagan was a part of that. But, man, when Caden Fagan's gone down, McCray has really looked kind of like what we've seen from him as a true freshman. So, yeah, get him going. He's a threat out of the backfield, and you can't overlook that. You can't take that for granted, what he's able to do back there. He's sure-handed. He can make some plays in open space. He and Aiden Lawford are the two, right? I know Khalil Valentine's a fun story, and he's gotten a number of snaps here or there. But you got to lean on those two guys, and McCray is built like a guy who can take a lot of carries. And I'm not saying wing tee this thing and try to beat Michigan State that way, but you got to get him involved because he's running like he deserves to be involved more in the offense right now.
And I guess with the Michigan State attack, I mean, what's key to slowing down how they want to do things with a first-year head coach, and I guess how they want to play offense?
Yeah, they don't run the ball very well. They can make some plays in the air. Nick Marsh, wide receiver, a freshman wide receiver, he looks every bit like somebody who's going to be a really good player in this conference for, 2 more years, maybe 3 more years, depending on what his NFL looks like. You can't let him get loose. I'm curious who they line up out there. I'd imagine it'll be Caleb Patterson on him to get things going. Maybe Xavier Scott, and you figure out a different idea in the slot. I mean, at this point, maybe Xavier Scott is the best bet. You saw him chase Daniel Jackson around before that. Looked like an ankle injury against Minnesota in the second half that kept him out. You can't let him. He can really change the game quickly. Childs can make some throws. I really worry about Childs' ability to run. I mean, if you're Michigan State and you're game planning this, and you look at other quarterbacks who have come through who can run a little bit, that's got to look pretty appealing to try to work that in to what you're able to do offensively. So Illinois' got to keep him contained. If he's going to make a throw or two, he's going to make a throw or two, make him do it consistently. And Aaron Henry, dial up some pressure. We talked about this. I know a lot of fans have seen Gabe Ackes, Seth Coleman drop into coverage on some of these. They talk about changing the picture, right? That's the big thing, is make a quarterback see something different. Well, we were talking about The Office, Tristan. I saw you drop a little reference in earlier. If the picture is anything other than Gabe Ackes coming at the quarterback, you probably don't have the right picture. I understand the value of trying to make things look different for younger quarterbacks. Whatever you can do beyond that, Gabe Ackes, you made a wrong decision if he's not coming at the quarterback. I'd like to see them get more aggressive with that, get more aggressive with the Kanino DeLuga, try to make Childs uncomfortable back there and put the ball in harm's way.
They're the same picture? Is that your?
Well, it was supposed to be when Michael was getting married, and they said, Michael, if you're in costume, you've done something wrong. If you got that whole deal. That's what I was going for.
Don't light the parking lot on fire.
I didn't put it out there as well as I probably could have for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess anything else you're looking forward to? Are you expecting the win to play a factor at all?
Seems like Michigan State, the Wind, and Memorial Stadium don't have a fun history with one another. Yeah, I mean, it's November, and Memorial Stadium's winning. We're looking up at these flags here, and they're going. That flag down there is going. It's at this time of the year, you have to assume it will. How big of a factor, I don't know. If you're Illinois, you hope that maybe you're not relying on a field goal in a very critical time where the wind would be a factor there. But, yeah, it always does. There's going to be a punt from somebody that you're like, what in the world just happened? That's wind in November at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah. So a lot going on. Obviously, crossover season. Illinois football, or goodness, Illinois basketball, 3-0 so far. I guess what do you make of their start?
Yeah, it's what you expected, right? A little bit of a struggle to get going against a unique Oakland zone the other night. But now it's Alabama, and now it ramps up. And Alabama's going to be ready to go after a really exceptional game at Mackey Arena against Purdue and a loss last night. You're going to learn a lot about Illinois in that game. And those two teams want to play very similarly. They want to play fast. They want to shoot threes. Brad Underwood and Nate Oates are kind of living in the world of, if If it's not a three, you're at the rim or you're at the free throw line. And anything else is a big firm no thank you from us. So it'll be a fun game in Birmingham next Wednesday. Women's basketball's got a big commit. They have 4 top 100 players signed in the class of 2025. That is a huge deal for Shauna Green and her coaching staff to be able to restock after this COVID core is going through its final year of eligibility. And, man, they're going to lean into some freshmen next year, but they've got a lot of talented freshmen coming in.
It's really been cool to see what Illinois women's basketball has become. Seeing what it was in fairly recent pre-Shauna Green times.
Not good.
No, not good at all. But seeing what it's become is a lot of fun, and who knows what kind of heights that program can reach. I guess more Illinois or Big Ten football. Brett McMurphy reporting Kurt Signetti signed an extension at Indiana. I mean, was that a surprise to you?
No, because it's one of those. He was making $4 million. I think the deal now takes him up to about $8 million annually. That is, please stay away, SEC teams. We would not like it if you came in and took the coach who really sparked Indiana football to ways that we haven't seen Indiana football go in a while. I know Tom Allen had that year. Was that the COVID year, Tristan, or 20? I think it was the COVID year with Michael Penix, and they really put a lot of wins together here. But look, the expanded postseason, the expanded playoff, I should say, you've got a chance. Indiana should be a playoff team, and you pony up to make sure the coach who got you there doesn't run away from that.
Yeah, who knows what they can do against Ohio State? That's going to be an interesting
It'll be a fun game.
Yeah, I mean, see how good that team actually is. Any more thoughts on Illinois at this point of the season, and I guess kind of a crossroads of what your season can be?
Yeah, I just think it's so important to get back on that winning track, because it's not even so much about the guy. We've asked the players, you have, I have, we all have, about like, hey, how do you avoid 2022? And I don't know that it's as much about them feeling like, oh, here we go again. It's people who come here, right? And you don't want a fan base to see a really exciting team across the street and say, oh, okay, well, they've lost 2 in November and it's the same road. Catch you later. We're out of here. We're going to the State Farm Center. You want to prolong that interest, because the Citrus Bowl, I know it's not the playoff. I understand that. And it's hard to find, people getting really amped up about non-playoff bowls. That's a good bowl game and a good chance to take this fan base to Florida. We saw them turn out really, really well for the LiaQuest Bowl in 2022. You just got to keep that going, right? And you got to sell transfer portal. You're probably going to need a left tackle. You're probably going to need an edge rusher in the transfer portal. You want to close this thing strong, so you're not a team that, you have 6 or 7 wins, but you lost 4 of the last 5 or whatever it comes down to. So I think it's to get back, kind of get that positive buzz going. It's a really bad time from a perspective, or from just the way people look at it standpoint, because you have to sit on a loss that really probably you could have made an argument shouldn't have happened. They got healthy, but you just got to kind of get some buzz back.
Is that the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl now?
It is.
Hopefully
we get boxes of Cheez-Its.
I know. I love those, like the Pop-Tarts Bowl, Cheez-It, anything with like snacks or just like the Mayo Bowl. Those
big snack guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's good for you.
Any fun kind of little thing you can do with a bowl game, and Mayo bath, Cheez-It bath.
Oh,
it's bowl game. Let's have some fun, right?
Cheez-It bath is a dream.
Yeah, for sure. Love to get some of those up in the media box. Let's see. Illinois obviously trying to get a 7th win today. Joey, what do you got coming up on 24/7?
Yeah, we're gonna have a post-game pod, quick hits. Jeremy Werner and I will have reactions from this game. I know there's some recruits on campus. Obviously, women's basketball, men's basketball still goes. Crossover season, no sleep and crossover season, but big opportunity for Illinois today.
Who are some of the biggest recruits in town?
Yeah, you know what? They've got a lot of commits. Carson Boyd is here. Andre Levette is here. But they're also starting to get some 2026 guys rolling in. It's not quite the Michigan. It's not quite the Kansas, but just guys they've been involved with over the course of the last few months. Getting a chance to get them here on game day visits.
For sure. Well, we've got a lot coming up on WCIA as well tonight at 10. We'll have plenty coming up on our digital channels before that as well. So that is it for Joey Wagner. I'm Tristan Thomas, and thank you for tuning in to the Your Illini Nation pregame show.